Okay, so today we're going to be doing trigonometry. Completely
empty.
Nice. So today we're going to be doing trigonometry. We're going to be focusing on what we started yesterday. Alright, so again, yesterday we started by identifying an angle that we are using to judge a length of a side or a measure of an angle. And we talked about three important terms. Can anybody tell me what the first of those terms were when looking at a triangle? Adjacent. Okay? And adjacent ended up being up the angle or the side that is not the hypotenuse, that is next to the angle that we are talking about. So in this case, the adjacent is right here. Then our second point of contention, or what's another one that we discussed? Go ahead. Opposite, and that is the side that is opposite of the angle that we are looking at. And then finally we had the what? Hypotenuse. Okay, when we go to the back of this page, the first thing we are going to do for all 12 problems is identify the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent for every triangle. Then we're going to get into the trig. Before we do that though, we want to review that sine is going to be our opposite divided by our hypotenuse. Cosine is going to be our adjacent divided by our hypotenuse. And tangent is going to be opposite divided by adjacent. I told you three different ways to remember those yesterday. So hopefully you've got one of those down as your go-to mnemonic to help you remember whether you use sine, cosine, or tangent. Alright. Then we finish with an example. And so we labeled angle C and highlighted the fact that we were dealing with angle C. Then we labeled the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent. And we talked about that the sine of C was going to be 5/13. The cosine of C was going to be 12/13. And the tangent of C was going to be 5/12. And so then I pulled out the calculator and I went over, that our calculator, when I put it in, when I use my calculator, what mode does my calculator have to be in? Degrees, okay? And so my calculator has to be in degrees. So go ahead and take your calculator and check that. Now, yesterday I showed you guys that when you have the entire fraction, you're actually not using the sine, cosine, tangent button, you're using the inverse sine, cosine, tangent button. And that seemed like it was a little confusing, and it always is every semester, about when do I use the sine button, when do I use the cosine, and when do I use the tangent. But then not only that, when do I use the inverse, okay? And so that's why I passed out graph paper to you today. Because before we go to the back, we're going to create a little cheat sheet that helps us decide when we have to use the sine, cosine, and tangent button. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to label this as trigonometry cheat sheet. First, we're going to do it for sine. So I want to draw three triangles here. And they're all going to be the same triangle from our problem on the front of our notes. So we're going to be looking at this angle right here. and we know that this side is 5, and we know that this side is 13. When you do trigonometry, you set up a proportion. Okay? Now, when the angle is not given, we put a variable there. We're going to go with x. So here's the proportion you're always going to set up. Sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse, correct? And so this sine is over 1. So we're going to come down and use the numbers that are in our picture here and set up the same proportion. The sine of what? We don't know, do we? So the sine of x is equal to 5 over 13. Whenever we have that, whenever the x is next to our sine, this is when we use the inverse in our calculator. So you are going to type in your calculator, I'm going to put the buttons here, second sine, and then parenthesis 5 over 13, close parenthesis. So whenever we're missing the angle, we're going to use the inverse. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Now, angles round to the nearest whole number. So when I do second sine of 5 over 13, I get how many degrees? 20. Well, we're going to round to the nearest whole number. 23. So x is equal to 23 degrees. Okay. Now, for our second example that we can get, they can give us the angle measure. So they can say that angle is 23 degrees. The hypotenuse is 13. How long is this side? Now, you already know how long that side is because we've been doing this problem for 2 days. But if you didn't know how long that side was, we still have to set up the same proportion. The sine of what? We know the angle now, don't we? 23 is equal to, set up the same proportion we had in the other problem. Well, no, we technically don't know what this is. X over 13. Now, my question to you is, what are we going to be solving for here?
X.
X. How do I get x by itself? Think back to your algebra. Times by what?
13.
I'm going to times both sides by 13, right? And so when the x is on top, you're going to do 13 times the sine of 23. And in your calculator, that's exactly what you're going to put in. 13 sine 23.
You still press second?
No. That's why I purposefully put the box around the sine and didn't throw the second in there. Now when I hit enter, you round to 1 decimal spot. Well, guess what I got? X is equal to what? 5. And that matches with what we talked about, right?
I think that my calculator is not set up right.
Go to mode.
Yeah.
Is it in degrees?
No.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
When do you decide to press second sim on a problem?
That's what we're creating a cheat sheet for. The only time you're going to use the second is when you don't know the angle. If you know the angle, you're going to do either multiplication or division. It just depends on where the x is. Okay, so when we're done here, hopefully you're going to start to see a pattern. All right.
Gotcha.
Now, this third one, I know the angle, and I know that this is 5, but I don't know the hypotenuse. So I'm going to set it up the same way. The sine of what? 23 is equal to 5 over what?
X.
X. Now, the question is, how do I get rid of the 5? Can I times it by both sides to get rid of it? How am I going to get x by itself? I could times x by both sides, but then the x is over here, right?
5. Multiply both sides by 5.
If I multiply both sides by 5, that's just going to change that to 25. What can I do? It's easier than all that. If I divide both sides by 5, what happens? This 5 changes to a what?
1.
1. But then the x does not move to the top, which is what we want, right? Tyler was close. There's 2 steps here, but I'm going to combine them into 1. When I multiply the x to this side, then the 5's left on top, right? So then I have to divide. Okay, so let me do it real quick. Okay, everybody agree? I multiply both sides by x. Everybody agree? But what do I have to do now?
Divide by 5.
No, I have to divide by the sine of 23, right? To get x by itself.
Yeah.
So when we're done, what happened to these two things? What happened to them? Didn't they just switch places? So when the x is on the bottom of the fraction, you're just going to switch places with the whatever we're measuring. And so when you have the x on the bottom, you're going to do 5 divided by the sine of 23. And we should get what when we do that?
13.
We should. And sure enough, don't we? 12.8. Close enough, right? Yeah. Alright. So that hopefully this starts to sink in, let's go ahead and do cosine. So we're going to come down here and do cosine. And cosine is what? Cosine is what?
Adjacent over hypotenuse.
Adjacent over hypotenuse. So let's draw 3 triangles again. We're going to draw in our angle and pretend like we don't know what it is. So that's x. 12 and 13. So again, let's set up our ratio. The cosine of what at this point? What goes next to the cosine? The angle, right? So what's our angle? X. The cosine of x is equal to what? What's our fraction? 12 over 13. Okay. When the x is next to this angle, what do we use? Second. So we're going to do second cosine 12 over 13. And don't we end up with 23 degrees? If you guys had the notes up here, by the way, I just circled the answers up on the top to make sure that we followed through on the sign. And so when we did this, second cosine, oh, I already did that. Second cosine 12 over 13, we get the same degrees, 23. Okay, so in our second example, we're going to put 23 degrees. We're going to put the x here and the 13 there. Can I volunteer to help me set up the proportion? I'll start you out. Cosine, and then go from there. Okay, so cosine 23. And now what's the fraction?
X over 13.
X over 13. Okay. And so when we look at our sine, when the x is on the top, what do we do with these two pieces of information? Huh? We don't flip them. We multiply them. We multiply the number times the cosine of the angle. So when the x is on the top, you multiply the number times the cosine of the angle. And when we do this, we should get 12, or close to it. Well, let's check that. Can't get much closer to 12 than that. Okay. So now we're going to put the 23 here. We're going to put the 12 here and the x here. Volunteer, help me set up the proportion.
Cosine of 23
Is equal to
12 over x.
12 over x. When the x is on the bottom, what do we have to do? Flip what two pieces? The x and the cosine 23, right?
Yep.
So we're going to end up with 12 divided by what?
Cosine of 23.
Cosine of 23. And when we do that in our calculator, well, hot dog, what do we get?
13.
13, and we know that that's what the answer is. Okay, so I'm hoping you're starting to see a pattern. When the x is on the angle, you do the inverse. When the x is on the top, you multiply the two things. When the x is on the bottom, you divide the two things. But we're going to make sure this works, so let's go ahead and do tangent. Tangent is equal to what two pieces?
Opposite over adjacent.
Opposite over adjacent. So again, we're going to draw in our three triangles, just like the ones we've had. We're going to put the x here first, and we know the opposite is 5 and the adjacent is 12. So, somebody else, what is the first proportion I'm going to set up? So the tangent of x equals 5 over 12. But when I put it in the calculator, what am I going to put? What am I going to do?
And 5 over 12. Oh,
Can't.
Never mind. Second tan.
So yeah, I'm going to do second tan, tangent, and then we're going 5 over 12. And so when we do that,
Do you need these computers?
I don't, thank you.
You sure?
So when we do that,
X equals 2.
huh?
X equals 2.
Did you do second tangent?
Or
Should be 23, right?
yeah, I know. I see what happened.
Yeah. So again, we're getting the right answer, right? 23 degrees. We're sticking to what we know. Okay. So now we know x is 23 degrees. Let's do the one where the x is on the bottom, or the x is on the top. So x over 12. Somebody different. What's my ratio? Speak up, or I'm going to be calling on you. Jay, you got to get your notes out from yesterday. Put that in the recycle for one. What's my ratio? So tan 23 equals x over 12. Okay. When the x is on top, what do we do with the two pieces of information? When the x is on top, you multiply. When the x is on top, you're going to multiply. We're going to multiply 12 times the tangent of 23. And don't we get 5? Yeah. All right, last example with tangent. We have 23, we have 5 over here, and the x down here. This is the hardest of the three right here. Josie, set it up for me. Tangent of 23. 5 over x. All right. So Dakota, how do I solve this? What do I do?
You divide.
Okay, what am I dividing by what?
By x. You move the x over and switch it.
Okay, so okay. So the 5 is going to come first. 5 divided by what?
10, 23.
Yep. 5 divided by the tangent of 23. And I get 12. Okay. So go ahead and flip to the back of the notes that we did yesterday. And right now, all I want you to do for every problem is I want you to circle the angle, and then I want you to identify the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent for each problem. So that's all I want you to do. I don't want you to write anything else except for hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent for each triangle. All right. So, Kiara, number 12, what letter goes with that? Brandon?
H.
Okay. And then obviously this would have been the adjacent. Nancy? What letter? Okay. Jeffrey? All right. Sarah?
O.
Jennifer?
H.
Chandler?
H.
Gracielle?
A.
Arthur?
Oh.
Denise? Dylan? Sorry.
H.
Over here, buddy.
J.
It's not the biggest one.
O.
Yeah. And so then this one's going to be what?
Yeah, BH.
Gotcha. All right. Jess? This one?
O.
Josie?
A.
Ashley?
H.
Right here? Okay. But I'm going to take a look at it again. Where's the right angle, right? So which one should be H?
19.
Yep. And so then which one, what's this going to be then?
Adjacent.
Okay, good. All right, and Tyler? Okay. Dakota? And then I'll finish these last two up. This is H and O, and this is H and A. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take about 5 minutes, and I want you to decide, are we supposed to be doing sine, cosine, or tangent? Well, in this one, the numbers are on O and A. Well, is that sine, cosine, or tangent? Tangent. So I'm going to put the tan right there. So right above the problem, or right below, wherever you can, tell me if the problem is going to be sine, cosine, or tangent. And it's based on the two numbers that are given. Now, in numbers 4 through 12, it might be where the x is. It's going to be the x in a number. So like the side that doesn't have a number doesn't play. So like this has nothing to do with this problem. This has nothing to do with that problem. All right? So go through and tell me whether we're doing sine, cosine, or tangent. Number 2, sine. Number 3,
Tangent.
tangent. Don't be lazy. Say the word out. Number 4, sine. Number 5, cosine. Number 6, good. 7, 8. 8 is tangent. Opposite and adjacent. Number 9.
Cosine.
Number 10. And number 11. And number 12. Cosine. And I wrote it out. Told you all to speak it out, and then I wrote it out. Okay. So now we're going to set up the proportions. And it's as simple as, I don't want you to solve it, I don't want you to do any of that right now, I just want you to write a proportion. So the tangent of 28, so your angle always goes next. So in number 2, it's going to be the sine of x equals, and then write your fraction. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, so it's going to be x over 32. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so it's going to be 12 over 16. So I now want you to go through all 12 problems and write out the proportion. All right, so Ashley, what do you got for this one right here?
Tan x equals 5 over 12.
Perfect. Tan of x equals 5 over 12. All right, number 4. Tyler, what do you got?
Number 4.
Mm-hmm.
Sin 40 equals 16 over x.
Perfect. All right, number 5. Kiara.
Cosine 64 equals 17 over x.
Okay. Brandon, number 6.
Tan x equals 4.
I'm gonna. You had it, but what's tangent? Okay. There you go. All right. Number 7. Graciel.
Sine x equals 13 over 27.
Perfect. Number 8, Dakota.
Tan x equals 27 over 8.
Perfect. Number 9, Jeffrey.
Cosine 33 equals x over 19.
Good. Number 10, Nancy.
2 x equals 11.
Which one?
Are you good with that?
Yeah. There you go. 23 over 11. All right. Number 11. Jessica.
Sin x equals 9 over 29.
Good. And then finally, let's go with number 12, and we'll go with Josie.
41 equals x and 33.
Good. Okay. Now, the question that's going to come up now is, what do I do now? If the x is next to our word, sine, cosine, or tangent, which one do we use? Second, we use the inverse, okay? If the x is on the top, what are we going to do with these two things? Multiply them. If the x is on the bottom, what are we going to do with these two things? Divide them. Okay? Round everything to whole numbers for today's purpose. I'm good if you round everything to the nearest whole number. So degrees and sides to the nearest whole number. As we get better at this, we're going to do it the sides to the nearest tenth. But go ahead and do degrees and sides to the nearest whole number. We're going to go ahead and do 1 through 12. Complete the answers. I want to know what x is equal to. Use your cheat sheet. The question I want to ask you guys is, I'm going to ask you whether we multiply, divide, or use the inverse. That's the first thing I'm going to ask. Then I'm going to go ahead and give the answer. So I'm kind of expecting everybody to answer this. For number 1, do we multiply, divide, or use the inverse? Multiply. So 32 times the tangent of 28 tells me that x is equal to 17. So that's the answer. And so the question that I got was, how do we know it's tangent? That's the first step. Identify that this is opposite and adjacent, and then you know it's tangent. So tangent of 28 equals x over 32. And so then once you get to this point, then you know whether you need to multiply, divide, or use the inverse. Okay. Number 2, what are we going to do? Inverse. Good. So second sine. When I did that, what did I get for the angle? 49 degrees. Make sure when you write an angle, you write the answer in degrees. All right, number 3, what are we doing, everybody? Inverse. And so what did we get for x in that case?
23 degrees.
23 degrees. Number 4, what are we doing? Dividing. And so x is equal to what?
24.
Yeah, 25 is what I'm going to end up going with. Make sure you're checking that rounding. Okay. Number 5, what am I doing? Okay, again, what are we doing? Dividing. And so when I divide, what do I get for x? 34. Okay, who's good so far? Just want to double check. Who's good so far? Who's not good so far? Like who's struggling beyond, like who did the first 5 and has no clue how we got there?
Hey, isn't 535?
It rounds down. I mean, if you're getting it within a half, I'm pretty good. Okay. Number 6, what are we doing? I only heard one person talk. I want to hear everybody. What are we doing? Inverse. And so what is our angle? 76 degrees. You guys all just told me you were good, so I should really hear you talking. Number 7, what are we doing? Inverse. And what's x? 29 degrees. Number 8, what are we doing? Inverse. And so what is x? Yeah, or 74. I don't really care. I'm a perfectionist, so I'll go with 74. When you round that 4 to a 9 with a 9, you get 5, and 5 rounds up. So I don't know. Either way, you've been good.
That isn't bad.
Number 9, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? Here's I heard dividing and multiplying. The x is on the top, so we are multiplying. And so what do we get for x? 16. Alright. Also, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because what's the longest side? 19. And so this side has to be smaller, right? Yeah. Alright, number 10. What are we doing? Inverse. And so x is equal to 64 degrees. Number 11. What are we doing? Inverse. And x is equal to 18 degrees. And then finally, number 12. We're multiplying, and x is equal to? Okay. Workbook. Oh, man. We're on page 211. On page 211, I want you to do 4 through 8 and 11 through 14. Now, I'll give you a hint. 4 through 7, I'm sorry, 4 through 7. I'll give you a hint. In 4 through 7, you're going to have to multiply or divide. In 11 through 14, well, look at those. What are you going to have to do for 11 through 14? Speak up.
Inverse.
Yeah. 11 through 14 is all the inverse. So on page 211, 4 through 7, and 11 through 14. When you're done, bring those to me. I'll check them, and then you're done for the day.